Mahan, for inviting me to say a few words of introduction. And thank you all for this evening. In a special way, thanks to Andrew and his bride who are here this evening to honor us with their presence and discussion of this incredible book. I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
You introduce.
I'm supposed to introduce
Yes,
you?
yes. But you can do whatever you want.
Oh, okay, yeah. Why don't I just take over this event? Yeah, give me one of my books. I talk about the sacrifice of Abraham.
If you take over the evening, we will all be born from lament. That's one of his book titles.
Yeah, but perhaps I can say three things by way of introduction. Three things. The first one is really on a very personal note. What a joy, what an honor for me to finally meet Andrew. He and I have been orbiting around each other, trying to meet physically, but until now, we haven't met. But it's like meeting a long lost brother. Maybe we are separated at birth. So because I do remember the first email of introduction that I got, maybe 2020 or 2021, you were organizing a series of workshops in public theology in Ethiopia, and you wanted me to be part of that.
Yes.
And then for some reason, I think I was on sabbatical, I couldn't be part of that. Then we were supposed to be together at a retreat in Texas. Again, I couldn't be part of that. Then you came through, maybe that was at the dialogues that Mahan is talking about. Then you wrote to me again and said, oh, maybe I will see you. Again, our paths didn't cross. And then I think we talked briefly around Geleta and his admission here, and yeah, so but we didn't meet. And then I get an email that, hey, Greta is in the country, you're going to drive to Notre Dame, could we have lunch in Notre Dame? I was again away. So it looks like we have been missing one another, but finally, what a joy to meet you in person. I'm so delighted for this evening to meet you. There's so much that we share in common. When I think you first sent me an email, we talked about the sacrifice of Africa and what that had meant for you in the work that you were doing in Ethiopia. And I'm so glad that through that work, somehow we connected and discovered one another. So that's the first thing, personal. It's like, this is about me, so you came to we couldn't meet in other spaces, so at least we have an opportunity to meet. So thank you, and enjoy to meet you. The second thing I want to say is that through this interaction, email, I could feel the deep sense of passion that is driving this man. A man that is filled with so much passion, and I think restlessness as well. And trying to learn a little more about him, I found I think the sense of his restlessness is also connected to the sense of his homelessness or being a citizen of more than one world. He's American, but he is Ethiopian as well. He moves back and forth. He is a scholar. First-rate scholar, University of Chicago, PhD, and very intellectual academic. But he's deep down also a practitioner. He wants to know the meaning of these high theological sounding terms. What do they mean on the ground? He's a pastor. I understand you're a pastor as well. But he's also a peace builder. He's a prolific writer. He's an organizer, an entrepreneur that has founded many organizations, including Faith and Flourishing, Yeah, maybe you say a little bit about some of these. So he's kind of moving back and forth. There is a certain kind of, in a way, belonging to more than one world, in which he, I think he discovers the ground in that faith and flourishing. Looks like that's the way you discover the kind of anchor that allows you to move back and forth between so many worlds and trying to bring them together, to connect them, to try to kind of explore the boundaries that seem to tightly tell us, no, you can only be one and not the other. It's either or, and you defy that. No, it's not. It's not either you're here or there. It's both and. That we can belong to both and so the sense of who are my people for you is a very complex question. So I like that kind of really discovering you and your work, and there's so many publications and initiatives around that sense of identity, an overflowing sense of identity. The third thing that I would like to say again by way of introduction is that this book, Blessed Are the Others, grows out of that. When Andrew sent me a draft of that and wanted me to read and say a few lines about it, I was traveling. Part of the traveling is connected with the work that Mahan said that I'm doing in Uganda, this institute. So, but when I came, one of the first things that I wanted to do, other than, of course, getting the classes ready for the semester. So once I started reading, I said, wow, this is quite incredible. It reflects the same kind of restlessness, but the same kind of grounding in faith, searching for a more. Two things that I really appreciated about the book. First of all, is the way it is written. Simple, elegant, and truthful. And I think I say that much in the simple, compelling, but pressing the boundaries and taking a key text from the scriptures, Matthew's Beatitudes, blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, and really exploring that in very extension and contemporary ways of what that means. But connected to that his sense of restlessness that he's always driving towards a new we. That out of so many fragments of our life, God is really meant on creating a new sense of belonging, a new sense of community that is beyond east and west, south or north, black or white. But for that to happen, we must learn to cross boundaries. We must learn to embrace the otherness in our lives, especially what Jung would call the shadows in our lives, the things that we fear, death, pain, suffering, tears. That's how it begins, even before we cross into other geographical territories or we meet others who are different from us. We must begin with that ourselves. That deep sense of creating a new way, forging a new way is what I like about that, grounded within this beatitude. And the call of Jesus in the Gospel is precisely about that. So I appreciate it so much, this book and the way that you wrote it in a simple, straightforward, and compelling way, but really reflecting your own journey, your own life. So it's not a kind of a forced kind of scholarship, but it just kind of reflects your own journey, where you are weaving together your own story, personal story, with deep theological insights and exploration of scholars, Baldwin, Bonhoeffer, and others. It's just a very beautiful book. So we are honored to have you here, and thank you very much for being here.
Pardon me. Please. Oh, excuse me. Friends, I'm so honored to be here with you tonight, and
Father Katongole's introduction brought tears to my eyes. I've often asked the question, where is home? And who are my people? And I've come to the understanding that home is the people with whom you are known and loved. And some people may know you but not love you. And some people may love you but not know you. And the words that you just shared made me feel deeply known and loved. And that feels like a special miracle of grace, because we've just met in person for the first time, although I've known you for a really long time through these babies of yours, for which I'm so grateful. So thank you for that deeply, deeply moving introduction. I want to begin these brief remarks with gratitude. As Hannah Arendt reminded us, authentic thinking and thanking are always inseparable. I want to thank the Ansari Institute for generous hospitality to share this book talk today, and my publisher, Bittersweet Collective, and Kate Schmidtgall in particular. I want to thank Alex Shu for so generously including me in the wonderful trialogues that Mahan mentioned a minute ago. They were so generative and filled with friendship, and I am truly grateful to be part of that community. Deep and sincere thanks to Mahan and Stephanie Mirza. Seeing your face is like seeing the face of God, and I thank you for your sacred welcome. Deep thanks to Rebecca Go. Your kindness and your hospitality is unmatched. I'm so grateful for all that you are and all that you do, Rebecca. For my friend and former student Gelata Tesfaye, I never guessed that one of my students in Ethiopia would become a presidential fellow at the University of Notre Dame. But God is merciful, and Gelata worked hard, and I'd say press on in your vocation of becoming a theologian of peace. I'm proud of you and grateful for your friendship. Galatoma Ola. And Professor Katongole, when I co-created the first program in public theology in Ethiopia at the Ethiopian Graduate School of Theology, I very intentionally made your work core to our curriculum and wanted every one of our students to read your work and to learn from you. And I want to thank you for being one of my teachers, and being introduced by you tonight was the highest honor. Please receive my deep thanks. And I want to thank my wife, Lily DeCourt, who's in the back. Thank you for loving me and walking with me through that homelessness and many identities. It's been a wild rodeo. You've been with me through joy and suffering as we become human together. And I love you, and I'm delighted that Lily's first art show is opening on Friday. Pope Francis said, an artist is an apostle of beauty who helps others live. Isn't that wonderful? An artist is an apostle of beauty who helps others live. Lily, you're my apostle of beauty. Thank you for helping me live. We live in a violent time. The world is witnessing more conflict-related deaths than any time since the Rwandan genocide in 1994. Sadly, much of this violence has taken place in beloved Ethiopia in its civil war, where an estimated 1.2 million people have been killed, 5 million people driven from their homes, and 20 million people made to suffer extreme hunger. Othering, religious nationalism, dehumanization, and populist fascism are surging around the world, including here in the United States. In this violent time, I dare to ask this question: how can we become humanely happy? And by humanely happy, I mean a quality of happiness that is deeply intertwined with the happiness of others. Whether we call it flourishing, well-being, the good life, eudaimonia, nirvana, or something else. We all long to be happy. As the late prophet Gustavo Gutierrez, professor of Notre Dame, wrote, "No one is born to suffer, but to be happy." Last year was the hardest year of my life. I received over 50 pages of death threats for my peace advocacy amidst Ethiopia's civil war. I watched as my Christian faith was colonized by the prosperity gospel, religious nationalism, and I felt acute fear of being abandoned by people I love, including people with whom I thought we shared a common faith. My identity was stolen, and Lily's and my finances were wrecked. My beloved father was diagnosed with cancer and eventually died. I felt intensely empty, filled with self-doubt. My marriage was in pain, and I feared I was losing the will to live. This is the context in which I wrote this book, Blessed Are the Others, Jesus' Way in a Violent World. And this experience, both in Ethiopia and here in the United States, drove me to rediscover the most primal teaching of Jesus. In a time not unlike our own, surging with imperial expansion, political violence, religious nationalism, and feverish longings for a Messiah, Jesus dared to announce the path to humane happiness. It was his most primal teaching, his passionate manifesto at the start of his public movement, the most successful social movement in history, it turned out. We know it as the Beatitudes, and I call it the Beatitudinal Way. And if you have a chance to spend time with this little baby, as Professor Katongole mentioned, I spent time with James Baldwin, with Eddie Hillesum, with Dietrich Bonhoeffer, with Toni Morrison, with Gandhi, King, some other real inspirations and heroes in my journey, and I hope you'll enjoy spending time with them. The basic story in Blessed Are the Others is this: Jesus' Beatitudinal Way is a brilliantly integrated path into humane happiness. It meets us exactly where we are in our universal humanity and invites us into a new quality of prophetic humanity. Each way station on his eightfold path confronts us with a crucial question or crisis. It is a path of fire that sets our humanity ablaze in the ways that it wants to burn. And I'd like to read a poem that I quote in the book that I think describes the structure of the 8 blessings of Jesus, or the Beatitudinal Way. It's from the poet Judy Brown. This is on page 18. She writes, "A fire grows simply because the space is there, with openings in which the flame that knows just how it wants to burn can find its way." What I'm suggesting in this book is that Jesus begins in this fiery place of our universal humanity, and in between each of Jesus' 8 blessings, there is this fiery place of decision, of crisis, where we have to decide if we'll go deeper into the shadows, as Father Emmanuel said, if we'll go deeper into the suffering of our humanity and ultimately into our hope. And I'm going to conclude just by reading a short passage of the book that gives a very, very simple overview of this beatitudinal way into humane happiness that Jesus offers at the very beginning of his movement. Blessed are the poor in spirit, because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Jesus begins his beatitudinal way by naming our universal human condition, poverty. And he speaks blessing to us poor people. The truth is, all of us are poor in our own ways, but not all of us recognize our poverty or can receive our belovedness in the midst of its pain. We fear that our poverty is permanent and so we easily become hardened, grasp after invulnerability, and resist processing our suffering. Will we stop here? Jesus promises us a new future of everlasting belovedness and invites us onward with his next blessing. Way station 2, blessed are the grieving, because they will be comforted. Jesus next invites us into our grief and blesses us here. Many of us fear that if we allow ourselves to grieve the pain of our poverty, we'll come undone, become unwanted, and find ourselves abandoned. We feel pressured to appear healthy, happy, and successful. But Jesus gives us permission to enter into the convulsive, volatile emotions of our experience and to process the pain that lives in us. We can be softened with our tears. Still, grief can become intoxicating and boil into rage, vengeance, and violence. We easily try to overcome our pain by punishing others. I use this new term, punishing, to describe how we recycle our pain by punishing others. But all we're really doing, again, is inflicting our own pain on the other. Will we stop here? Jesus promises us comfort and invites us onward with his third blessing. Blessed are the non-violent, because they will inherit the earth. Jesus next calls us into nonviolence and blesses us in this practice. Creative resistance to violence is one of Jesus' most groundbreaking teachings. Gandhi, who began each day by meditating on Jesus' words, wrote, "Jesus was the most active resistor known perhaps to history. This was nonviolence par excellence." Unquote. Jesus' nonviolence is fierce, but refuses to overcome poverty and grief by impoverishing and grieving others. Of course, it also makes us more vulnerable and arouses our anxiety. Perhaps the greatest fear of the nonviolent is being endlessly displaced and dominated by the violent. And so the nonviolent easily withdraw from the world and passively resign themselves to wait for a magic fix in a nebulous future. Will we stop here? Jesus promises us that the whole world will become a home for the nonviolent and invites us onward with his fourth blessing. Blessed are the hungry and thirsty for justice, because they will be filled. Jesus next blesses those who passionately ache for right relationships of mutual flourishing. That's, I think, just the simplest definition of what Jesus meant by justice. Right relationships of mutual flourishing. These people plunge into reimagining human identity, money, and power. They devote themselves to struggling for practical transformation here and now. But justice is also risky business. Allowing ourselves to long for a better world opens us to disappointment and the fear of being starved. Hope is dangerous. If we're not careful, our craving for change easily consumes us and becomes judgmental condemnation. Before we know it, we find ourselves imitating the punishing patterns of injustice that we claim to be struggling to overcome. Will we stop here? Jesus invites us to trust that the justice starved will be fully fed and calls us onward with his fifth blessing. Blessed are the compassionate, because they will be mirrored with compassion. That's how I translate the Greek that's used in Matthew's gospel. In the Greek, it's the compassioning will be compassioned. But we don't use compassion as a verb, unfortunately, in English, so I translated, blessed are the compassionate, they will be mirrored with compassion. Jesus next blesses those who open the aperture of their souls to the pain of others. In compassion, our craving for change expands into a universal mercy for all who suffer. Rather than condemnation, we learn afresh to desire our mutual flourishing. But the fear of the compassionate is being unmirrored and left alone in our own pain. After opening ourselves to the misery of even our enemies, will we be abandoned and overwhelmed with the sadness? Cynicism easily sets in and shrouds our vision. Will we stop here? Jesus promises us that the compassionate will be mirrored with compassion and invites us onward with his sixth blessing. Blessed are the clean-hearted, because they will see God. Jesus next blesses the clean-hearted. Immersing ourselves in the humbling waters of compassion cleanses the soul. Any lingering residue of superiority to others is slowly washed away in compassion. Notice that this sixth way station is the first place that Jesus names God. Still, this purifying baptism can feel like drowning. Plunged into the pain, we fear that we will never be able to see God or goodness again. In this chapter, I talk a lot about Mother Teresa and her excruciating dark night of the soul. But through the dark night of the soul, Jesus assures us that a heavenly vision will open and we will hear the God of peace call us beloved. But when this happens, we so often build a shrine to our religion. Our temptation is to camp out in catching a glimpse of God. We erect a wall around this holy revelation. Will we stop here? Jesus daringly promises us divine vision, but invites us still onward with his next blessing. Seventh way station. Blessed are the peacemakers, because they will be called the children of God. Jesus next blesses the peacemakers. We see in this seventh way station that any authentic vision of God must open our eyes to perceive all people as our sacred siblings, including our enemies. For Jesus, this is because of who God is. God is our parent, as Jesus taught us to pray. And so peacemaking is our divine DNA. People of peace make healing relationships, reconciling communities, and overcoming othering our life's work, our divine family business. But peacemaking is rarely popular, as probably a lot of us in this space know. As we begin making peace, we fear being labeled as radicals and rejected as traitors. All too easily, we surrender to societal pressure and protect our approval at the price of peace. Will we stop here? Jesus promises us that the peacemakers will be correctly identified. Notice how Jesus is speaking so insightfully to our vulnerability. The peacemakers are so frequently character assassinated, misidentified, mislabeled. And Jesus says, no, you will be known and loved exactly as you are, a peacemaker. Don't be afraid. And so he invites us onward with his final blessing. What is the climax of this way to humane happiness? Blessed are the persecuted for the sake of justice, because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Jesus' beatitudinal way builds towards a brilliant but counterintuitive climax. He speaks his final blessing to people who are persecuted for the sake of justice. We see now that the path Jesus invites us to walk decisively deconforms us to the prevailing patterns of culture. It changes us. Beatitudinal humans have patiently traversed the previous 7 way stations: our poverty, that inner sense of emptiness, of inadequacy, of deep vulnerability, our grief, the sorrow, the volatility, the trauma that lives inside of us, nonviolence, justice, compassion, the cleansing of the heart, the work of making peace. Beatitudinal humans have patiently traversed these 7 way stations, and so they count the cost of becoming humanely happy. In the face of character assassination, exclusion, and killing, they remain courageously committed to truth, love, and justice. Jesus says that these persecuted people have become prophets. They unveil reality and reveal what is truly precious. Of course, Sigmund Freud said on the first page of Civilization and Its Discontents that humans so repeatedly misperceive what is truly precious in life. Jesus says those people who have walked this eightfold path, they can see it with prophetic vision. To them, Jesus declares at last, rejoice and be happy. But the fear of the persecuted is precisely the same as the poor. Will we be insecure and suffer forever? Is there any hope or only permanent displacement? Here, Jesus promises us that the persecuted will be safe and perfectly at home in the kingdom of heaven without end. I would say that the simplest description of the kingdom of heaven in the teachings of Jesus is our unconditional belovedness and belonging. Jesus says that the persecuted will receive unconditional belovedness and belonging. And so, at last, Jesus invites us to begin again, to return to our first work and walk once more through our poverty, our grief, our nonviolence, and the rest of his beatitudinal way. This is the fiery path that takes us home to the kingdom of heaven, where our humanity wants to burn with true happiness forever. And I'd like to just conclude these brief remarks with a word from James Baldwin, who I consider one of the most prophetic writers in American history. Baldwin wrote, and this is the end of the introduction to my book, "Our humanity is our burden, our life. We need not battle for it. We need only do what is infinitely more difficult, that is, to accept it. To accept that all others are blessed, starting with the poor and the grieving." I'm so grateful. Thank you so much, friends.
Are you good taking a few questions?
Yeah, I would love to.
Anyone?